All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to the CX Chronicles podcast. Super excited for today's show. Megan, Bowen, welcome to CXC. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Us too. So guys, we have a really awesome story today that Megan's going to share with us. She's got some incredible experience around not only working at awesome, exciting, super well-known companies, but how hard it is to build these businesses in a short period of time, amass a huge stable of customers, and then somehow figure out how to keep all those customers happy. So I'm super pumped for today's show. Megan, why don't you start off by telling the CX Nation your elevator pitch? Give us a couple minute view into how you got into your CX and CS leadership story and how you landed where you are today with Refine Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved to New York when I was 19 and finished business school. And my first job out of college was as an account manager at an ed tech company called Echalk. And I did that for over 6 years. And that's when I really fell in love with everything related to account management, customer success, customer support, CX. And I did everything there from implementation to professional training, to product adoption, to renewal, to upsell, to support and troubleshooting. And I really felt that the discipline and the role really allowed you to tap into so many important skills, whether it's emotional
Yep.
intelligence or problem solving, a little bit of sales, a little bit of relationship building. And I think that that was really where I fell in love with this discipline. I was like, I love this space, and there's so much here. After my tenure there, I then went to ZocDoc early days, and actually took a little bit of a step back. I joined as a customer support agent. I was
Okay.
obsessed with the company, really, really wanted to work there. And so I was on the front lines for about 9 months,
Awesome.
picking up the phones, answering emails from patients and from doctors. And it really allowed me to understand the CX pain points, right, for both the
Yep.
patient and the doctor. And
Yep.
what was cool is we didn't really have a formal post-sale function. And after about 9 months on the front lines, I was able to say, you know what, here are some themes that I'm seeing. And if we build a post-sale team, I think we can actually mitigate a lot of the problems that we're seeing,
Absolutely.
improve the doctor and the patient experience. And they gave me the opportunity to build out the post-sale function at ZocDoc.
That's
So
awesome.
18 months, they gave me 3 people. We grew the team to 25, built out process, playbooks, for everything from handoff to launch to ongoing customer success and retention, and was a fantastic experience. My first time building a team. I then went to GrubHub Seamless
Okay.
and built out their B2B account management function for companies that would partner with them to feed their employees. And so again, they didn't have historically a post-sale function. They had a sales team and a support team, and I was able to come in and take all my learnings from building the team
Yeah.
at ZocDoc and do it
Yeah.
again.
I was just going to say one quick question for you is just like,
Yeah.
how perfect was that to be able to see how to build that playbook, how to build those, or how to connect the dots around this process, and going from a huge company like ZocDoc right into another huge company like GrubHub. What were some of like the 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 major things that you were able to just build upon right out of the gates, going from one experience to the next?
Definitely. So I think one of the things that I learned at ZocDoc was the customer experience sort of begins in the sales process.
Yeah,
And
big
so
time.
having a point of view and ensuring that the sales process itself is customer centric and is being handled in a way that sets that customer up for long-term success. So I
Yeah,
think that was a big takeaway. And when I went into Seamless, I was able to partner with the head of sales and really ensure that we were starting off on the right foot.
I like that.
Then you have the handoff, which is another critical milestone in the customer journey. And so being really intentional about what that handoff looks like. And then onboarding is that's one of your first impressions,
Yep.
especially when
Yep.
you're a CSM or an AM taking on that account for the first time. And so really designing a very intentional onboarding experience. So those were sort of my key areas of initial focus. And
Love it.
when I first joined Seamless, the sort of the time to value, the amount of time that would pass from when the customer would sign on to when they would actually start using the tool was about 35 days, which was a
Wow.
long time.
Yeah.
And with the changes that we made to the sales process, the handoff and onboarding, within my first 6 months there, we were able to reduce that to 12 days.
Wow. Wow.
And, not huge, big changes, right? Small adjustments
Yep.
that really mattered a lot and
Yep.
had a big impact, and ultimately was better for the customer, better for the business. And so, yeah, there was so many things. That said, one thing that I also learned with the ZocDoc to Seamless transition was I tried to implement a lot of the same things that I did at ZocDoc sort of as is, and some of them didn't work. And so it was also, okay, I can't necessarily just plug and play
Yeah, right.
everything, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes the concept or sort of the philosophy or the guiding principle is correct, but I'm in a different business and
right.
I'm in a different
Yep,
context. And so another really good learning was there are some things that you can plug and play, but in many cases you have to take the idea and think, how does this need to be adjusted
totally.
in my
Yep,
new context? So that was another good learning
yep.
that I
That's
took with
awesome.
me
That's
in
awesome.
future roles too.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that. And you're right, because not all of these things are completely interchangeable. Many of them are. When you get into tools and you get into some of the processes or some of the, even just playbook fundamentals, how you can take an awesome playbook format from one business to the next or one team to the next, but not everything, not everything always jives. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can't take like a circular item and put it into like a square type of a hole. But I think that that's awesome. You were, number one, you were able to recycle some of those learnings. But the other thing too is, I think, and Megan, you and I were talking about this the other day, but like, it is interesting to be able to shorten the time that it takes. You mentioned the time to value piece, but
Mhm.
even just when you're talking about growing a business or growing a team, when you go through it once in one business and then you're asked to do it again in another business, there are certain things that maybe the first time around it took 2 quarters or 3 quarters. And then the second time that you see it, you're like, wait a minute, I know that we can eliminate all of these items. Let's take those right off the table. I'll save us 30 days right there. These
Mhm.
items right here, we're going to outsource that. So I'm going to save us another 30. And then you've basically just cut the time down. So I love that you're kind of getting into some of the ways that you can sort of, think about how to optimize that within any business as you're building upon your experiences.
Yeah.
Megan, I'd love for you to keep going. Please continue on.
Definitely. And just to build on that point that you just said, because actually I have a really solid example. While I was at ZocDoc, one of the things that I realized in hindsight, I spent those 9 months on the phones to sort of distill like the key tensions and problems in the business that really
Yep.
fueled the strategy for building the post-sale team. What I realized was, oh, I could have learned that information a lot quicker
Yeah.
than
Right.
the 9 months, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
one of the things that I did immediately when I joined Seamless was I actually had the entire sort of client-facing team, and it was a mix of some support people, some sales people, and sort of the handful of account managers that I inherited, because it was really, we were going to be building it up from scratch. But I basically had people complete a time study
Okay.
of how much time they were spending with
Love it.
customers on
Love it.
these key sort of milestones, whether it was onboarding, whether they were proactively reaching out, whether they were responding to reactive inquiries. And it was actually I was able to sort of use those time studies as a baseline for how the team was spending time with our customers on these things. And that fueled a lot of really important insights. And now I do that. I did that at every company that I went to after.
It's
Like within
huge.
my first month, I'm like,
Yep.
we're all doing time studies.
Yep. Big time.
And the conclusions or the insights are different business to business, but that methodology is really powerful. And it's data driven, right?
Big
I'm like,
time.
look, I'm
Yep.
telling you, the team in aggregate is spending X hours per week on this thing. And like,
Yeah.
we don't want them spending time on that. Let's make these process changes, et cetera, to, make a meaningful change. So that was anyway, just a very tactical
No,
example
I
of
love that
something.
one.
Yeah.
I'm super happy that you brought this up, because it's amazing how many times you can enter into a business conversation and someone's saying, I need your help with X, Y, and Z. And they're talking specifically about your CS or your CX team. And a big thing that many companies ask for, we need help with you building out dashboards, and we need help with building out modern CX metrics and KPIs. And then one of the first things that I've had in these conversations with, I'll say, well, how does your team spend its time today? and
Mhm.
you'd be blown away. Even at really awesome, super like companies that are doing great things and growing exponentially, they don't always have that answer. So it's like a phenomenal starting point, which is like, wait a minute, what are you guys even doing today? Also, this made me
Mhm.
think of something. In the past, we've used those. Did you use any of the tools to do this measuring? Because I used with one of our last teams, we used the cube device, where essentially you can program the different activities or tasks that you're going to compute for your activity, and you could literally flip the thing on your desk. What did you guys use a tool like that, or was it
For that.
more manual recording and people just taking count of what they were doing?
For that, yeah, I've heard of those tools. I haven't actually used them, but I do want to. So I've created basically an Excel template
Yeah,
where I actually will try and pre-populate most of the selections.
cool.
So it makes it really easy. Basically, they have this sort of template up and they're grabbing a
Love it.
drop-down menu and
Yeah,
recording in 30-minute increments for a period of 1 week. So I try to make it as easy as possible. And then by building that template, you can then really easily, I sort of built in different formulas so you
yep.
can aggregate and sort of analyze fairly quickly to take away a lot of that manual burden. So that's the system that I kind of set
I
up
like
for
it.
myself that I've been
Yeah.
using that works. But yeah, I've heard about those cool tools. I got to give them a try.
It's huge though. You're right though, Megan. It's like once you do it for a week, do it for 14 days, do it for whatever 30 days, whatever your sample is going to be, and you sit in the conference room, or sorry, you sit on your Zoom calls now in our modern setting with your team, and you look at the data and you're blown away. And then
Oh
it
yeah.
it leads to so many additional. Well, with this bucket, why are we, what does that bucket really mean? There's a lot of that. Then you get into the definitions of what do some of these activities or these things that we're asking our teams to do, what do they even mean? Do they add actual value to the business? Does it add value does it add to the bottom line? Does it
Hmm.
add to making their days a little bit easier and making them enjoy their job working with your business?
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the common themes that I've actually seen at all the businesses I've been at, and I'll kind of get back to my career journey in a moment, is very often with customer teams, everyone is doing both reactive and proactive work at
Yep.
the same time. There are blurred lines between what the customer support team is doing versus the customer success team or the account management team. And actually, it creates a ton of inefficiencies when you don't distinguish that type of work. And so, my sort of general rule of thumb is your customer support team is optimized to handle reactive work, and so you should be funneling 95 to 99% of that reactive work to the support team, and then you should let your success team, your account management team, be proactive.
Yep.
It's extremely difficult to do both. It's extremely stressful for a team member to do both, and it actually, you kind of can't do either well if
Yeah.
you're tasked with being both sort of firefighting
Yeah.
and like being that strategic trusted
Totally.
advisor. And yeah, every company I had varying degrees of that problem.
Right.
And the time log was very easy to say, hey, your team that you want to be proactive is spending, in aggregate 50 hours a week on reactive work. Let's figure out how we can move those workflows into this team,
Yep.
and
Yep.
free up their time to focus on retention or revenue, or customer satisfaction related activities.
Big time. Yeah, and one last thing on this point, Megan, too, is involving product with that too. I remember
Mhm.
specifically with the one project that I was referring to, the minute you put some of that data in front of your product team's eyes and they say, wait a minute, those three things are taking up a third of our team's time. We can literally give us like a weekend and we could bang out some cool new script that does maybe not all of it, but like a big chunk of it, and then you can start optimizing on the fly. The other thing too, I've always found that's how you get that connectivity or that collaborative energy between your CX, CS, and your product side, which makes it a
Yep.
lot more fun too.
Totally agree. I've absolutely taken those findings, and yeah, it's the human perception of time is always inaccurate.
Yeah,
And so the I'm a huge fan of the time study, even for personal time management as well.
yeah,
But anyway, we can I'll bring the tangent back
sure,
around
yeah,
to your original
please do.
question.
Yeah,
Had a great run at GrubHub and Seamless. I actually joined right after the merger, before the GrubHub IPO. And then post IPO, they acquired a bunch of other B2B food companies. And so, sort of, my last project there was super interesting. I was actually tasked with migrating customers from each of the acquired companies onto the GrubHub or the Seamless
fun.
technology. And obviously, with the goal of retaining all of those customers and that revenue, and making the migration process as smooth as possible. So that was fascinating. I just, felt like it was a really good learning opportunity to think about change management and how are you unpacking the customer experience, on one platform versus another, and figuring out the right way to, move them from one system to another that's least disruptive and in a way that they're excited about. So that was sort of a one-time project, but just learned a ton there. When I wrapped that up, I then went to Manage by Q. They needed an account management team. I had done that twice before. I was like,
You're
let's do
becoming a
this.
pro.
Let's do this. Built out the AM function at Manage by Q. And my tenure there was transformational because while I was there, the COO, the head of revenue, head of marketing, and two head of operations, sort of over my first sort of 8 months, all moved on, left the company.
Okay.
And so I sort of subsequently took on all of those functions over the course of my first year there. And so ended up being chief operating officer, managing all go-to-market teams, marketing, sales, customer success, customer support, and operations. There was a heavy operational layer to the business. And man, when I had that scope and then was able to see all those teams through my customer success lens, my CX lens, right? Because that's where I've always focused. It was really fascinating and empowering, and it gave me so much more appreciation for how important all of those teams interacting together are for the customer experience.
Big time.
And in hindsight, I would look back and be like, oh man, I had tunnel vision of like, I'm just going to focus on account management or customer success.
Yeah.
And not realizing how important the whole picture is. And so now, and I think not a lot of people that come from the customer success background maybe have that opportunity to see that big picture. And so I think that that was huge for me. And now all those teams matter. Marketing is so important. Sales is so important. Success is important. Support, operations. And like the real trick is, how can you get all of those teams aligned? How can you get all of them working in service of your ideal customer? And that is what's powerful. Like if you get that right, then you actually are really delivering a great experience and delivering the right outcomes to your customer. And so I was very tunnel vision sort of before. And now I think customer success is like, it's not just a department, like it's a company mind frame, and all those teams need to be kind of on board with that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. I think, one of the biggest reasons why we talk so much about the 4 CX pillars and team, tools, process, and feedback, it pairs into exactly what you just said. If you start thinking about the first pillar of team, for example, you immediately begin to see all the layers that are involved in team. It's not just your team. Team could go as big as, what does the organizational chart of a business look like? How does HR think about recruiting, retaining, training, hiring, firing? How do they think about all those facets of team? Then you have financial operations involved. What can you even afford for a team? What do you need to get out of that team to be able to see the ROI to make it worth the spend, or worth all the energy in the first place? Move on to tools. It's the same damn thing. You get into tools. What's the whole tech kit that we need to use just to serve our customers, and then also to set up our team or our employees to be successful managing those customers. Process, we could go on. We could literally do an entire separate episode just on process. But process is for folks like us, Megan, we know process is essentially like the wiring or the code to make all that stuff work together and jive together. And then the feedback is just the internal and the external feedback that you can get from your customers and your teammates to make all those things tighter, faster, better, more efficient, and just a better experience in general for all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you think about the first pillar of team, one of the things that I believe and I try and action on at all companies I've been at is your internal team has to be set up for success, and they have to be, happy, engaged, challenged team members. Otherwise it's not going to, anything that you're going to do for your customer is not going to translate, right? And I think people often are like, oh, the customer comes first. It's like, no, your people come first.
Big time, right?
If you take care of your people, they will take care of your customers. And, even going back to separating like reactive and proactive work, like it's incredibly stressful for a team member to be asked to do both, right? And it can be demoralizing if they feel like they're not good at anything because they're just like, trying to like, it's like whack-a-mole, like everything coming at
Absolutely.
them and they're just trying to like get through the day. And so many things, whether it's like your internal sort of people and culture initiatives, or like you said, your systems and your process, like they all need to be designed so that your employee is successful and
Yep.
that they're happy. And getting that right is foundational for anything that you do for the customer. I find a lot of people can kind of skip over that, and they take the sort of the customer is always right, or put the customer first a
Sure.
little too far. Your team member is also your customer, like
Big
they're
time.
your internal customer, right? So it's like you have to take care of them first, and if you do that really well, and then you set them up with the right systems, the right process, you empower them, the customer stuff will work out. It really will.
Yep.
So I'm a
Yep.
big believer in that.
No, couldn't agree more. I think it's like, I think this is why it's becoming more and more, I think, popular, and more of a necessity for businesses to look and really, really value and weigh the internal feedback and the external feedback almost comparatively. I know a lot of folks are
Mhm.
doing some awesome things with doing essentially like your voice of customer, your VOC efforts, coupled with a VOE, like your voice of employees. And if
Mhm.
you look at some of the major trends or the major themes that are pairing up on both of those items, probably a pretty good start for what next quarter's OKRs might need to look like, or might need to be solving for, or minimally need to be somewhat pointed at. Because if you've got both your customers and your team saying, yeah, those three things are really going to enable us from growing, or from reducing the number of detractors we create month over month, or better yet, just literally making the customer journey map that much better for everybody to keep retention at an all-time high, it's an easy way of taking a look at what folks think about your product or your service offerings.
Yeah, I no, I couldn't agree more. And I think the prioritization of the employee well-being and the empowerment, it also, I think, fuels the like the process building for the customer. So like what I like to do, and what I feel like a leader's responsibility is coming into an organization, is you need to create the conditions for success, right?
Yep.
Like I've written a million playbooks in my career, and like I could come in and be like, yeah, I could write that playbook. But what I'm realizing is actually I need to create the conditions so that the team member can write the playbook,
Absolutely.
right?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah. Big
they
time.
are they are the closest to the customer. Granted, I always, of course, like I talk to customers all the time, no matter what job I've been in. I'm a week doesn't go by without me talking to a customer.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I feel like the people that are actually doing the job, if they have sort of a hand, or are actually the author of the playbook,
Yep.
number one, it's way better because they're
Absolutely.
living
Way
that
better.
day in and day
They
out.
know it inside and out.
They know it inside and out. Then they feel ownership and they're
Yep.
bought into the process. They want to follow the playbook that they wrote, right? Not
Yep.
the one that got pushed down to them. They then become an evangelist with the rest of the team, and getting them on board. And the team is also more likely to buy into it and adopt it when they know their fellow colleague wrote it, and
Big time.
and lives in their shoes day in
Yeah.
and day out. And so that's the other sort of shift that I think my time at Q really helped create was, no, my job isn't to write the playbooks at every anymore. It's to take care of my team, and set them up for success so that they can do it, and that they can own that
Yep.
and refine it and iterate it and execute it day in and day out. So I think that's an approach that I found that works well if you're able to empower your team effectively.
Big time. I think just to add one last point to it, helps with expectation setting too. So like
Oh
if
yeah.
you're writing these playbooks internally, and they're going to be essentially your directional flight for where you and the team and what the expectations look like. And then I love that you brought this up earlier. If you're connected with your revenue side, and you're connected with your sales side, and those expectations match and they align and they mirror each other, there really should be, like, you're baking customer centricity, you're baking retention literally into not only like the way that the funnel works, but the way that the entire customer journey works. And if you can do that, it typically creates a lot more happy people that go about telling other people how great your business is. Or just
Mhm.
from the retention perspective, maybe you don't need to have as aggressive of sales goals if you don't lose everybody, right?
It's so true. And the importance of trust and alignment between marketing, sales, and customer success is so important. It's so fascinating to me that almost often the default state is that those teams are working almost against each other
Yep.
and
Yep.
not with each
I
other.
agree.
And there are different reasons, right? Like marketing gives me bad leads,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
don't trust them, right? Or customer success, like sales are bringing on bad customers, or they're over promising on something that we
Yeah.
can't do, and then
You
I'm
hear
dealing
that one a
with
lot.
it. Yeah. And so it's also the investing in sort of building empathy internally with all of those teams, building trust. And
Hmm.
it's another thing that's like, oh, we don't have time for that, or like, but if that isn't working, your customers are going to feel it.
They'll feel it.
And so I think that's another really, it all comes back to your people and your team, like is really like the conclusion that I've come to. And it's, as a leader, I spend sort of probably more time figuring out how can I create a culture and a team dynamic and set my team up for success. And I found that if I focus on that, a lot of the other stuff just kind of happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
get that right, the other things that you think you need to do, your team takes on, and
Yeah.
they get it
Yeah.
done, and they do
Yeah.
it probably better than you would have done it.
I agree. I agree. That well, I mean, think about it. Like your average agent will have so many more conversations again and again and again, a day in and day in and day out. And then on top of it, then take it a step further. Not only are they having the conversations, but then they're populating the tickets or they're populating the CRM. So then they're
Mhm.
seeing the tool side. They're doing the clicks, the scrolls. They're feeling it 50 times a day. You know it really well. Like when you're leading these teams, you know it really well, but you're busy doing other things. You're helping with the team. You're helping to report things to leadership. You're helping to figure out the big customer escalations that are about to blow everything up for the day. You're dealing with a lot of that fun
Yep.
stuff. And so if you take the time to listen to these folks who are doing it day in and day out, and they already know which top 3 areas, if you could just fix X, Y, and Z, man, this would be a lot easier for me. And you'd have the benefit of helping the customer. And I think a lot of companies say that they do a really good job with that. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. Frankly, I think post-COVID, companies aren't going to have a choice. I think that the market will demand this as far as companies really being on top of this stuff. And
Yep.
then I also think that the market's going to begin to demand more of an expectation on how the employee side is treated in general, because I think that COVID has changed a lot of people's minds around just the world and just the way that things work. And I think that people are going to actually start being a little bit more mindful around things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and I think, um, I do think because of everything that is happening in the world, I think there's, I think a broader recognition that things like empathy, emotional intelligence, investing in your people,
Yeah.
like that
Yep.
really matters.
Yep.
And I think that's a positive. So I hope that it continues to get more focus and that more companies are making it a priority.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Megan, do you want to take a couple minutes to talk with us about Refine Labs? We'd love to hear a little bit about what you guys are working on and some of the things that you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, after my time at Q, I actually had a short stint at a company called Platters, which was a similar food tech company. And then, obviously, the pandemic sort of had a big impact to that business. And I moved on to join Refine Labs a few months ago. And so, this is a bit of a different role and different
Okay.
type of company than what I've been at previously. I've always sort of over the last 15 years of my career, it was 5 different B2B
Yeah.
companies that offered both a software technology solution, but then there was also sort of a real life component interaction to it. So whether you're booking a doctor's appointment online, but then you're showing up to the doctor,
Sure.
you're ordering food on your app, and that food's coming to your office and you're eating it, right?
Yep.
At Managed by Q, I would order cleaning services through the software, but then someone would come to clean my office.
Yep.
I really enjoyed the combination of working with customers to get them to adopt a technology, but then also figuring out, okay, how are we going to deliver the operational or
Yeah.
the real life
Yeah.
experience in a good way too? So that was a fun challenge, right?
It
You
is
sort of have
fun. Yep.
the tech adoption in that. So at Refine Labs, we are sort of the next gen demand generation marketing consultancy. So we help B2B companies with their marketing and their demand generation and their brand building efforts.
Okay.
So what's interesting in my role is, our product, if you will, is our team of demand gen experts
Okay.
that partner with our customers to consult and advise, and then we will execute against various programs as well. So there is an execution component.
Okay.
But what my challenge is now, and what's I'm having a ton of fun doing, is how do you design a customer experience when the entire experience is them interacting with another person.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to help them achieve their revenue results ultimately. Like our success is when our customers are successful in growing their revenue in a healthy way. And we have a lot of really, innovative and different strategies and approaches to demand gen that sort of, go against the old way of doing things.
Good.
And so a big part of our work with companies is, let's shed that growth at all costs mentality. Unit economics matter.
It does.
B2B buyers buy differently today.
Yep.
Investing in building a massive sales team and doing a ton of outbound sales isn't probably going to get you the results that you want. Of course, you need a sales team, but people learn about new products and services differently today.
Yep.
20 years ago, you needed a salesperson to knock on doors and talk to people. There was no other way to find out, right? What was going on. And it's just not the case today. And so whether it's, how we think about Facebook advertising or LinkedIn advertising or how to leverage Google ad search effectively. And then also working with them to think about, you need to think about getting, building your brand, using, LinkedIn, like as an organic content posting to get the word out about your product or service, right? So many people buy from word of mouth now, right? Like if you need some system, you might be like calling 5 of your friends and say, hey, what tool do you use for this thing? Like that's how you're making a buying decision now.
Yeah.
And so it's working with companies to really reframe that perspective and jumpstart that transition. The reason why I was really excited to join Refine Labs was after being kind of in the VC-backed startup world at so many different companies, I believe that there's a better way to do business in B2B. And I think that, we are starting focusing on sort of marketing, which is really the beginning part of the process,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
And beginning to pave sort of what I believe is like the new go-to-market approach. And if you do that really well, like at Refine Labs, we don't do any outbound sales. We tell people what we do, customers come to us, and our sales process is more about, is this a good fit?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to convince you to come work with me. I'm trying to understand, based on your business and what you're doing and what your goals are, and based on our philosophy and approach, are we aligned philosophically and on our values of what we're trying to do? And then, is your business the right fit for what we can do today? So the sales process is not me trying to convince people to work with us. It's let's get everything on the table and let's see if this is going to be a win-win for both sides.
Like it.
And it's just so refreshing. And we talk to new prospective customers, every day, and we're bringing on ones that are the right fit. We're letting people know, I do a lot of the sales calls and I'll tell them,
nice. That's fun.
I love it. And I'm like, actually, like, I would love to work with you, but this is why I don't think, based on what you've told me, we're not going to be able to give you that result within this time frame because of X, Y, or Z. And people are like, thank you for telling me that. Okay. And I'm like, if things change and you're at this point down the road, let's talk again, because I do think if X, Y, and Z, if you get to that point, then we really can have a big impact. And that's when we should talk again. And so it's everything that we do is customer centric, and that's kind of where I come from. And so, it's the most sort of buyer centric marketing process, sales process. And then when they're a customer, they came to us, they wanted to work with us. We've identified it's a good fit, and then we can get to work and we can help deliver the outcomes that we promised. And so, and then it's just the fun challenge of like, okay, what should that handoff look like? What should the onboarding look like? How are we ensuring that we're staying on the same page, managing expectations, ensuring that the value that's being received is recognized by the customer, and that we're aligned on where we're going and what we've done. And so it's a whole new challenge. I've had to rethink a lot of playbooks. But it's been awesome. So I'm loving it so far. I'm a few months in, and it's been a great experience. And I think for me, like my why and why I'm excited to continue to build this business out is, I believe we need to do things differently across marketing, across sales, across customer success. And, that is the ethos of Refine Labs. And I believe that if we can continue to be successful and drive real business outcomes for our customers, which we do today, people will get on board. The more results that we can point to, the more success stories that we can point to, people will be more likely to, okay,
Yeah.
I do need to change the way I'm doing things. I need
Yep.
to adopt to, the customer has the power now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think that I think, well, first of all, that's awesome. It's great that you guys are building a business that's really focusing on all these areas that people like us have known for a while as part of the magic sauce to making these things pop really quickly. Number one, but number two, I just think that marketing in today's world is essentially you are a huge part of the experience curation process for any potential customer base, meaning
mhm,
like you're not only are you telling the story of who you are or what the business does or why they exist or what audience they serve, but you're literally already showing like these sneak peeks of the experience that you're about to
mhm,
get or the values that you're going to gain, or the maybe it's the time that you're going to get back in your life, or maybe it's that extra boost to push you over the line on the sales side just by getting that extra 10, 15, 20, 25% by shaving the pencil and whatnot. And I think
mhm.
that post-COVID, Megan, people, business owners and executives across the world are going to be yearning for ideas in that regard. And whether they're pro-COVID companies or negatively affected COVID companies, all of us are going to have to think about this. All customer-focused business leaders are going to have to think about this, and it's going to be a big part of sustaining into the future. So I love it. So Megan, as we wind down the show, I want to make sure, where can people find you? Where can people get in touch with you? This was awesome, by the way. This was a pleasure having you come on and share all these
Yeah.
awesome ideas and insights. But where can folks find you?
Absolutely. So, the only social media platform I am active on is LinkedIn, but
Okay.
I love LinkedIn and I love sharing from my experience. I try to post content, mostly daily. And so, check me out on LinkedIn. You can get a ton of customer success, sales, marketing, personal development, leadership content. So yeah, check me out there. And, you can also go to refinelabs.com is the new agency that I'm at right now.
Love it. Well, Megan Bowen, thank you so much for joining the CX Chronicles podcast. It's been our absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Adrian.